Hello there. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Matt Ingram. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest. He spent decades working at the highest levels of Canadian broadcasting and journalism, hosting one of the best-known shows in our province and interviewing some of the most important people of our time. Most recently, you may have caught him doing an expert job hosting the English language leaders debate in the federal election. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Hamilton-born broadcaster and journalist Steve Paikin. Welcome, Steve, to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Matt, great to see you again. And I'm not just Hamilton-born, Matt. I'm in Hamilton every weekend visiting my 91-year-old father.
Oh, so I love it.
I love Hamilton. I love my dad more than Hamilton. But anyway, I'm around the hammer a lot.
Do you got a favorite place to go when you're in Hamilton, a restaurant or a place?
You know, the favorite place, you'll understand this, the favorite place that I enjoy going is my dad's apartment because he's there.
That makes a lot of sense, Steve.
But you know, when I come into town, we go for long walks on the weekends. It's really nice. We were out the other day walking past City Hall. We walked over to Whitehorn. We walked down to the bakery a few blocks north of that to go buy some bread. I'm delighted to say that at 91, the guy can still go out and walk for an hour or two, and he's doing fabulously well.
Oh, that's pretty great. I'm going to have to look for you because that's my neighborhood. So if I'm walking on the weekends, I'll have to keep my eyes open for you.
You bet.
All right. So it's been 19 seasons of hosting TVO's flagship show, The Agenda. You're stepping aside now. Let's start there, Steve. Why step aside?
You know, the contract I'm just about to come to the end of, I signed 3 years ago. And at that time, Matt, the boss here, John Ferry, said to me, you know, let's sign this one for 3 years. And if you want to keep going, we can. And I said, you know what, I think that's going to be time, John. I think probably let's do this contract, and then that's probably it. You might remember Barbara Frum. She was a legendary Canadian broadcaster at the CBC many years ago. And I used to work at CBC before TVO. And one day I saw Barbara Frum, and we just started talking. And she said to me, you know, Steve, one day the viewers are going to wake up, and they're just going to get sick of looking at your face. And I thought this is a bit early to be giving me this advice, but you know what? Matt had always stayed in the back of my head. And as a result, I'd always known that at some point I wanted to stop doing The Agenda at a point where I felt I was still pretty good at it, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. And I thought 19 years is good. Let's leave the party an hour early versus a minute late. I'm going to stay on at TVO and do a few things. I'm going to keep doing the weekly Ontario Politics podcast, which is on TV every Friday night. I'm going to keep writing a weekly column, but I want to have a chance to do a few other things. And so I'm going to start to do those once the Agenda season is over at the end of June.
Well, let's start there. What are some of these other things that you'd like to do?
I don't know if I should talk about them yet because I don't want to jinx them. But suffice to say, I got about 10 balls that I'm juggling up in the air right now for a bunch of different projects. There might be another book in the offing. There might be something in the post-secondary world. There might be another kind of show or a podcast or something. But nothing I'm prepared to announce yet.
All right. Well, I like how you're keeping your options open there, Steve. Let's talk about The Agenda. 19 years is a long time to host a show. When you look back, are there some key memories that stand out for you, some moments that might make you smile?
You know, of course there are, but I tend not to spend much time thinking about them. I've always looked forward as opposed to backward. And even now that the program is coming to an end, I don't really have much time to kind of harken back and think, well, what did we do that was so worthwhile talking about? Because, of course, I'm always wondering about what I got to be doing for tomorrow. So, yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of shows that I'm glad that we did and that I'm proud of. But I think actually the best accomplishment is just coming into work every day, putting a show on the air, trying to have a civilized conversation, trying to impart information and analysis to viewers, hoping they get something out of it. I know I learn something new every day, which is, of course, the greatest joy in coming to work and doing this job, learning something new every day. And as you can see, that's the On Poly podcast, which is going to stick around on Friday nights. I don't even have to wear a suit all the time now, which is the best part about it. I get to dress down a little bit, which I really appreciate. But yeah, just the fact we did it every day, I think, is the big accomplishment. 19 years, pretty much every day. I'm okay with that.
How much work were you doing every day? Like, was this a 12-hour thing? Did you have to get up and read guest books, keep aware of the news cycle, all these things? Tell us more about how much effort goes into hosting The Agenda.
What were you doing at 6 o'clock this morning?
I was slowly waking up, Steve, and checking my emails, which is maybe a version of what you were doing.
At 6 a.m., I was already writing my column, which went up on the TVO website, in the afternoon. So this is a job that I have loved, but it's also a job that kind of never stops. It's pretty relentless. And yes, you have it right. You are always booking guests, writing questions, reading research, reading books of people you're going to interview, writing columns. I write a weekly column, writing the script for the Ontario Politics Podcast, the On Poly Podcast, for which I get to wear these lovely T-shirts. It's a 7-day-a-week job when the show is on the air. And if you want a chance to do anything else in life, you can't be hosting a daily show at the same time. It's just not going to happen. So thus the end after 19 years.
Yeah, you mentioned the podcast twice, and I got to say, I'm a listener. I enjoy it. And in fact, I chose not to wear a tie today because I saw you got to wear a T-shirt. Now you're wearing a tie and upstaging me, but that's okay. We'll talk about that later. How did you and John Michael McGrath come up with that podcast, and what do you think the appeal of it is going forward?
Well, the appeal is two deeply nerdy guys talking policy about provincial affairs. Me from a probably slightly more ancient point of view, because I've been around a lot longer than he has. But look, this is a guy who reads the Planning Act at 2 o'clock in the morning for kicks. Okay, he's a very deeply nerdy guy, and I think one of the reasons we've hit it off is that we both really care a great deal about the province and its place in Canada. We care a lot about policy. We like each other, and therefore we enjoy having these conversations. I mean, what you see on the On Poly podcast is a mix of, yes, some sort of scripted parts of our podcast that we do write down ahead of time, but a lot of it, and a lot of the most fun parts of it, are just when the two of us start riffing on whatever the subject is that we're talking about. And so I think it kind of works. We've been doing it for, I think, 5 years now. But it really took off once we started to record it and put it on television, as opposed to having it be audio only. Ever since, and I guess it's been about a year now, ever since a year ago that we put it on TV so that you can see it Friday nights on TVO at 8 and 11 p.m., the audience has just really bloomed a lot. And by way of an example, Matt, I guess I'm fortunate enough, having been on TV a long time, that when I'm either on the subway or walking on the streets downtown and wherever, people do stop me and they want to talk. And all the time in the past, they would say, hey, you're the guy who does the agenda. Let's talk about that. Now, as often as not, I get stopped by people saying, love that On Poly podcast. So I can tell just by virtue of all the interactions on the street that it's kind of gaining some currency out there.
Oh, that's great. It's a really interesting podcast, and I got to admit, I found it probably while you guys had just begun doing it. It was something I would listen to in the car on the way to work or the way home from work, and myself working in news, it was a great way to get some deep perspectives on politics that, me being a general assignment guy doesn't always have the time to dig into the legislature and those sorts of things. I encourage our viewers to check it out. It's definitely a good nerdy thing. Now, in addition to the podcast and the agenda, you also hosted some shows at TVO before the agenda, I believe, in the early 90s. Can you take us back? Tell us about your early time at TVO, some of the shows you hosted, and some of the things that stick out to you.
Sure. I can't hold down a job here because I think I've hosted 5 or 6 different shows while I've been here. So I start doing one, then they cancel it. I start doing another one, they cancel it. I was hosting the 6 o'clock news on CBC in Toronto when Peter Herndorf, who was just a legend in the broadcasting business, and his executive producer, Howard Bernstein, got a hold of me and said, we're doing some stuff at TVO. This is in 1992. So we're doing some stuff at TVO we think you might be interested in, and we're going to create some new stuff that we think you might be interested in. So come on in for a chat. And I did. And the first 2 things I did was take over an existing sort of weekly town hall show called Between the Lines. And then they said, we want you to create a new weekly Queen's Park show, which was called Fourth Reading. You know that every bill before it becomes law gets first, second, and third reading. Well, we were fourth reading. If it was a football show, we'd have called it the fifth quarter. But it's a politics show, so we called it Fourth Reading. That lasted 14 years. Between the Lines I did for 2 years. Then we started a new show called Studio 2, which was the first ever nightly live program that TVO had ever undertaken. So I did that program for 12 years. In the midst of that, we created a weekly foreign affairs show called Diplomatic Immunity, which I also hosted. And then in 2006, I think all of that stuff got canceled, and we created this new show called The Agenda, and that's the one I've been doing for the last 19 years.
Wow. And you said you were at CBC before TVO. I guess that would have been in the 1980s. Can you tell us a little bit about what it would have been like being a reporter in Toronto in the 1980s?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's the greatest education to learn about the city that you're living in. And I started as a City Hall reporter in 1982 to 1985 with CHFI, covered Toronto City Hall, just learned a ton. Then you become a general assignment reporter at what they then called CBLT, Channel 5, Cable 6 in Toronto. And it's a different thing every single day. You know, some days it's City Hall, some days it's Queen Park, some days it's crime, some days it's Board of Education, some days it's, whatever. It's a different thing every day. And you just learn a great deal about the city. And I did that. I worked at CBC from 85 to 92. Then I went to TVO. But the CBC was really such a great place to first of all, to learn how to do any number of different things, because I did street reporting, I did entertainment reporting, I did sports reporting, I did anchoring, I did a show on News World, I worked for the national news, I did radio. I mean, once you're in that building, they can sort of throw you into any number of different things. So you get a great education on a lot. But then you also get to understand, all right, I'm a good generalist now. Is there anything in particular, any format, any style that I now decide I want to do? And I decided I really wanted to go more in depth. And that's why the move to TVO was so logical at that point, because it was an hour every day and longer in-depth interviews, one-on-ones, panel discussions. That's the stuff that I discovered I really, really love doing. And, also being at TVO, they let me do a bunch of documentaries. I think I've produced, 4 or 5 documentaries here. Remember, they sent me to Poland for one. They sent me to the Balkans during the Yugoslav War for another. Washington. Anyway, we've had a chance to see a bit of stuff here, and, it's been pretty cool.
Wow. I mean, you've had such a varied career, and it goes back to a time before the internet, a time before modern journalism as we see it today. I wonder if when you look back at that time and you consider how things are now, are you concerned about the way journalism has moved, the broadcasting industry has moved in our country?
Well, I'm concerned. How do I put this? I'm concerned about a lot of things surrounding journalism today. Number one, we need to be better at what we do. We need to be more accurate. We need to be more fair. We need to make sure that when people drive by a demonstration, let's say in front of City Hall in Hamilton, and then read about it in The Spectator or watch it on CHCH that night, that they get a feeling that what they saw and experienced is actually accurately reflected in the coverage that they will see. I'm concerned that there are too many people who feel that whatever they see or read or hear in legacy media aren't reflective of their own experience. So we need to be really good at what we do. One of the things that concerns me about the way that journalism is going is that in the days when people sort of either started their day or ended their day with a daily newspaper, you'd go through the hard copy newspaper and you could bump into a lot of stories that you might not necessarily seek out. But just in turning the pages of the paper, you would see them. You would learn things you didn't expect to learn. You would be exposed to points of view that you might not necessarily seek out. That doesn't happen very much anymore, Matt, and that really worries me. Now we live in these echo chambers where all the information that you want comes at you via an algorithm, which is designed to satisfy your particular political prejudices. And so all you're reading is stuff that already reinforces your worldview. And you don't have much of an opportunity to hear competing views because all you're hearing is what you already believe. I think that's dangerous. It's one of the reasons I've loved doing The Agenda, is that I think it's one of the remaining places in journalism, one of the remaining shows, where you actually get competing points of view, I hope presented in a civilized fashion. But more and more of what I'm seeing nowadays is either, YouTube shows where the hosts are right-wing or left-wing, all the guests are right-wing or left-wing, you don't hear any contrary views. and it tends to be a bit of a food, like a bunch of people just trading smart-ass opinions, and it's not really very elucidating. All that worries me in journalism today.
Are there things that you think we could do as an industry to better address your concerns, to make a product that is fairer, more accurate?
I don't know, and that scares me as well. I don't know. The technology is such today that, of course, there's a million podcasts out there. Anybody with a phone can start a podcast now. So the technology has so surpassed, what it was when I started in this game. You pointed out when I started at TVO, I don't even think we could send email at that point. And we're so far beyond that right now. And I'm genuinely unsure about where it's going, about whether we can kind of try to recapture some kind of quality, or whether we're all just going to be, bloviating our opinions in our echo chambers, which doesn't really, I think, add a lot of value to the way we lead our lives. I don't know. I'm worried about all this, and so whatever I end up doing in the future, I want it to maintain the same kind of values as what I've been doing at TVO for the last 32 years, which is, I hope, accurate, honest, fair, civilized, engaging, energetic, but at the same time, rational, reasonable, not the food fight, something that has some kind of value.
You just hosted the English language debate for the federal election, and I want to ask you your thoughts on the value of debates, because recently I had a guest on my show talking about the shortening attention spans of younger audiences, the tendencies that you're talking about to see a quick clip on your TikTok or your YouTube or your Instagram, and that's the extent of the news that you get that day. You don't see the contrasting opinions. Do you think that people still have the stomach to sit down for 2 hours and focus on a debate like what you just hosted?
I know they do. I know they do because the numbers show that they do. That was a 2-hour debate. Millions of people watched it. Twice as many people watched it and listened to it on the radio as the previous debate in 2021. So there's that. Not everybody will, but a lot of people, millions of people, have the appetite to watch a debate. 1.4 million people in Quebec watch the French language debate. I mean, that's a very large number in a French-only debate. Beyond that, look at podcasts nowadays. Yes, there's plenty of podcasts out there that last half an hour, and that's great. Our On Poly podcast, we try to aim for half an hour. You pointed out earlier that you kind of like that you can flip it on, and in half an hour or 15 minutes, if you listen to us at double speed, which I often do, you can get a good summation of what happened that week in provincial affairs. But look at some of the other stuff. I mean, there's podcasts. I listen to something called Spit and Chicklets, which, because I'm a huge hockey fan, and I love these guys who come on every week and they chat about what's going on in pro hockey. And every episode's 3 hours long. And I listen to all of it. And, again, double speed. So it's an hour and a half. But I think as long as the personalities are engaging, the subject matter's engaging, I think people have terrific amount of appetite for longer, fair journalism. So, and all this business about the kids don't want to listen to anything longer than 2 minutes, I don't buy it. For sure, there is an audience for the 2-minute clips that you see on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. But a lot of that is exposing young people to issues, and then they will seek out more information on those issues. For example, it's a well-known trick of the trade that you put 2 minutes from a documentary on TikTok, and if people are interested in it, they'll go seek out the actual documentary, and then they'll watch the piece for an hour. So I'm not worried about that.
One other trend I want to get your thoughts on. This was a very tight race in this federal election. This is looking like Canada's becoming more of a two-party system as opposed to what we've been used to in the past. Does that concern you, that now it seems that you're either liberal or you're conservative and there's no room for the middle?
I don't know that we can come to that conclusion yet. That certainly happened the other night. However, I'd be careful about making any long-range, overly broad conclusions based on one highly unusual election. Remember, this was the kind of election that comes around, once in a generation, maybe once every other generation. Let's thank God that we don't have every single president come in trying to annex us and threatening to make us the 51st state and throwing tariffs at us and treating us as abysmally as the current president is doing. So that made this election different. It resulted in more people coming out to vote. And as you point out, it did result in, 85% of the people deciding they wanted to vote for only two parties, and a lot of the smaller parties got lost in the shuffle. But I'd hesitate to make any long-range conclusions about our political system based on this one election.
All right. Speaking of long-range conclusions, I know you have an affinity for provincial history. You've written a couple of books. You alluded you might be working on another book as we speak. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but hoping you're writing another book. What got you into history, political history, and wanting to be an author?
Okay, I think those are two different questions. Political history, I've just always been interested in because my parents, while not partisan people, were always very active in politics. They were engaged in politics. We talked a lot about politics and history and that kind of thing in our home. So my brother Jeff and I grew up with that. And the fact that we're interested in it to this day, me more than him, obviously, is not a surprise. Books? I've made documentaries, I've hosted TV shows, I've hosted radio shows, I've written for newspapers. I was a summer reporter at the Hamilton Spectator. In fact, Matt, I shouldn't admit this, but it's true. I'm probably the only summer student replacement reporter at the Spectator who had the job for 3 straight summers and was not offered a full-time job at the end of it.
Oh, what a mistake. They missed out on you, Steve.
No, I don't look at it that way. I thought, dang, I wanted to start in Hamilton. I wanted to live in Hamilton. I cared and care a lot about Hamilton, but I didn't make the cut. So that's life. But so I've had a chance to do a lot of different things in journalism. And the one thing I hadn't had a chance to do was write a book. And I always wanted to, just one. And I did 25 years ago, and it did pretty well. So the publishing company asked me for another one, and another one, and another one. And I think I'm up to 8 or 9 now or something. So, and I may have another 1 or 2 in me as well. So I got to figure that out.
Is there a topic that's sticking out in your mind? Something you're kind of thinking, hey, maybe I'd like to write about that?
My oldest son, who is a massive CFL fan, but you'll forgive me, he's born in Toronto, so he's an Argo fan. Yeah, exactly. We do not have that in common. And I've told him, I'm sorry, but you're out of the will. I'm leaving everything to your siblings. But he's always wanted me to write a history of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And, as crazy as it sounds, that's something I might actually be interested in doing somewhere down the road. But I got a bunch of topics right now that fascinate me. And, someday when I get a chance, I will sit down and figure that out.
Oh, I know you are a sports fan, so I got to bring up the Leafs last night. I'm a Leafs fan myself.
Do you have to?
No, I got to, because I got to commiserate with someone. And there's not, let's just say the producer of this program right now wears a jersey with a big C on it that I can't really take, but
you haven't fired him yet?
Maybe we should, Don, if you're here and Steve Paikin thinks we should fire you. What's your prediction for Thursday night? Do you think the Leafs have it in them?
I never make any predictions about anything because I'm always wrong. But suffice to say, that was the biggest egg this team has laid all year, to come into a deciding game where you can dispatch your enemy on home ice and play so poorly and seem to have so little jump. I found that very distressing. But look at, they have another chance for Game 6, and if they lose that, they have another chance for Game 7. And we know that only 4 times in the whole history of the NHL has a team come back from down 3 to win the series. So, history's against the Ottawa Senators. That's not to say it couldn't happen. How about Leafs? How about we just get it done? To quote the Premier, why don't we just get it done in Game 6, and then we can have Game 7 off. We don't have to worry about it, and we can get ready for the next series.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they'd make it easy on themselves, but I'm a little worried we may be going to Game 7. Yeah, and us, ain't that the truth. All right, well, Steve, we learned a lot about you today, but before we go, I want to know, is there maybe something about you that you don't normally tell people that you'd be willing to share with us? Maybe a connection to the city or something about you that doesn't come through with all your excellent journalism over the years?
Isn't that interesting? I don't know. Let me think. What don't you know about me? I went to my first Leaf game when I was 6 years old. I went to my first Ticats game when I was 8 years old. I do remember going to the Grey Cup in 1972, which Hamilton won 13-10. We sat in Box J. After the game was over, my family piled into our car. We rode down Main Street. People were dancing on the roofs of their cars. It's still one of the happiest memories of my life. I think it was December 2nd or 3rd, 1972. Uh-huh. Chuck Ely, rookie quarterback, Ian Sunter with the game-winning field goal, held by Gardy Henley with no time left on the clock, Tony Gabriel with all those great catches. You know, it's funny, I haven't thought about that game in a long time, but it all comes back. Hamilton, you know, it was a fabulous place to grow up. I grew up on the mountain. It was absolutely idyllic. It was a lovely, and is a great city. And obviously you heard the story about why I moved to Toronto, because I couldn't get a job in Hamilton back then from the Spectator. But I love the fact that my parents stayed in Hamilton and my brother's in Burlington. So I have great excuse every weekend to come back into the city. And my dad and I, when we were out for a walk the other day, we were walking around and we were dazzled at how many. He kept saying to me, "Look at all the cranes in the skies." He says, he's lived in Hamilton his whole life, 91 years. He says, "I've never seen so many cranes in the skies. There's so much building going on. And look at this building." I said, "I don't recognize that building. When did that get built?" And we just started walking through some of the neighborhoods downtown. And, you know, it's fascinating to see how the city has improved in some ways, gone down in other ways. And there were things that we saw that were deeply concerning, you know, homeless encampments and that kind of thing, which I never saw ever when I was growing up in the city. So, Mayor Horvath, first of all, get well soon. We wish you well with your recovery. And then you and council got to keep getting on it. We got to make sure that Hamilton fixes the problems it has and keeps being great in the ways that it is.
Steve, when's the last episode of The Agenda going to air? And do you know who your last guest will be?
I do not know who the last guest will be. You know, it's funny. Conrad Black was the first ever guest.
Oh, really?
Back in 2006. There might be some symmetry in having him come in at least near the end of our run anyway.
Yeah,
so
why not, right?
Who knows? Might be fun to have him back. It's the last Friday in June. So I guess that's the 27th. That'll be the final show.
All right. Well, Steve, we've taken up enough of your time today. Thanks so much for giving it to us. We really appreciate you being with us today. Always a pleasure to chat with you, Matt. Rock on. All right. Thanks very much, Steve. And to the audience, thanks so much for watching this episode of Newsmakers. You can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Matt Ingram. Have a good day.